Mirror, mirror on the wall, is it trauma after all? Up to now, we've learned a little bit about the emotions that cause us suffering, fear, anger, and grief, as well as being emotionally constipated, which is just a way to understand that we have stuck fear, stuck anger, and stuck grief in our system. And that's the reason why we are walking around with some type of mental health diagnosis or just feeling uncomfortable, restless, sad, and upset all the time. Now, today we're gonna connect it to trauma, because trauma encompasses all of it: the fear, the anger, and the grief. Classical trauma is known more under the umbrella of PTSD for people who have come back from warfare, historically known as shell shock. Now it's post-traumatic stress disorder, or for anyone who's experienced any type of abuse or neglect. That's also another form of trauma, as well as medical and physical injuries like a car accident or natural disasters. Today, I'm going to invite you to look at trauma more like a spectrum. The mental health trajectory has gone towards more of a spectrum process, because a lot of things can go under the umbrella of trauma. It could be a little bit on the heavier side, or it could be a little bit on the lighter side. And an easy way to understand what could be under the umbrella of trauma would be something that has caused some type of wounding or injury. So neglect being maybe a little bit less obvious, the type of wounding or injury that it could cause is being made to feel less than and unimportant, or failure to thrive. Where other forms of trauma, if someone's hurt you, harassed you, abused you, if you've had any kind of physical injury, if you've been around warfare, if you've seen very shocking or startling things on television, those are a little bit more direct and clear forms of injuries and woundings. Now, we will all have some type of injury or wounding throughout our lives. That's nobody's going to go through life unscathed. Where it could be more addressed under the umbrella of trauma is if it's unresolved. And we can break down any type of wounding or injury through one of three categories, and trauma has some type of mixture of the three. It could either be some type of wounding or injury that's put us in a survival mode or has threatened our life. That could be physical injuries, it could be physical abuse, it could be a car accident, a plane accident, or some kind of automotive accident. It could also be natural disasters, and sometimes just even seeing it. There's also traumatic grief, where there is a sudden loss of a loved one, which we're just not prepared for that. And then there is anything that violates your boundaries, whether it's someone who is constantly bypassing boundaries, who is verbally, sexually, psychologically, physically abusing you. That is going past your personal boundary. Someone who's harassing you, someone who's excessively persistent or overbearing. Sometimes it could even be looked at being put in a position that you don't want to be put into, like kind of pressured. And it could be something as socially required as going to school. Hence, ADHD, I tend to lump it under some type of personal boundary violation, because it could put you in a position where, for whatever reason, you haven't been prepped correctly for school, or you don't want to go there. Doesn't mean that it's necessarily bad, but the fact that you're being given the message that you have to do something you don't want to do, right? And a lot of things can go under that umbrella. And then the third form is anything that would make you feel less than, anything that could make you feel belittled, anything that would make you feel not enough or not good enough. And that could go under neglect and every type of other abuse, right? Like, I am so insignificant, unimportant. My boundaries are so insignificant, unimportant. I am so weak and vulnerable if there's any kind of physical threat, that I am not enough or good enough to keep myself safe or be important enough. And that can go for neglect, physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, harassment, bullying, physical injuries, going through warfare. It could just really address everything. Now, when we go back to these three different ways of identifying wounds that have been unresolved, some type of threat or survival response, that will put you in a fear response. That's where we have trapped fear. Or any type of boundary violation, that would probably make you more angry. So anything that would create an angry outburst, or some type of ADHD symptoms, or poor relational experiences, or even some bipolar disorder symptoms, because there are aggressive symptoms associated with bipolar disorder as well, or some forms of psychotic disorders. And then there is the one where we're feeling to be made less than, or not good enough, or unimportant. And that's all lumped in the emotion of grief. Now, this is by far not a comprehensive breakdown of what would encompass trauma. There's so much more that could encompass trauma, but this could help you understand where it might be relatable for you. And perhaps that anxiety could be linked a little bit more towards a fear response and some kind of unresolved wounding or injury that could be some type of mild trauma, or somehow, somewhere you were made to feel less than, or maybe being chronically bullied or criticized. And there's some type of a personal identity trauma there, that I'm not enough, I'm not good enough. And that could show up as depressive episodes, or dissociative identity disorder, having identity issues in general, or feeling really distracted, or having poor violations, and sometimes feeling like you're I have people often say, like, I had an emotional vomit when I talked to somebody, or oversharing, or then feeling really angry because someone used something you said against you, or being forced to do something you don't want to do, some kind of coercive behavior, even if it is that concept of like peer pressure that may show up, or a deadline that you're not ready or prepared for, right? And that could be where anger might be showing up. And perhaps maybe you might have looked at the diagnostic criteria of ADHD or bipolar or borderline even, and it might be more an injury of a boundary violation more than anything else. All right, so hopefully this information helped you out today. We will go into some further detail in the next episode. May peace be with you. Until next time.